Thank you, Mr. Courtney. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. And I've got three questions to ask, so I will ask you all to keep that in mind. Mr. Pulsifer, you brought out from both sides of the aisle the interest in ROI. It's clear that there's bipartisan support for that. Could you briefly describe how this metric could be applied in the broader post-secondary context? Risk sharing, performance bonuses, offer in-demand, high-quality credentials. Just a few more points on what you brought up before.
And the ones you touched upon, risk sharing is an excellent example. Oh, sorry, Mr. Pulsifer.
Two P's next to each other. Thank you, Chairwoman. I do think the more we can bring a spotlight to value, the better. That's for sure. I would share with you some of the things that we've held ourselves accountable to. That you absolutely, to increase value, you have to increase completion rates. So you have to look at how well our students who are beginning the program, completing the program. You then have to look at whether or not, having completed that program, are they actually obtaining employment in the field of study, and are they achieving the economic return on that, and what does that look like for the students through that program? Third, you absolutely have to be able to look at the cost of completing that program. There's no doubt that in many programs today that the wage for those completers of that program has not increased at the same rate the cost to achieve it has. I certainly believe that we can increase reporting and accountability at institutional level for such metrics. We certainly can also involve accreditors at looking at institutions to present their plans to improve those outcomes. And when we do so, we can then give that information to students so they're making better choices about their future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Gentles, I want to go back to Mr. Bowman asking you a question about balanced literacy and phonics-based reading instruction. There was a follow-up with Ms. Houchin. Mr. Bowman didn't give you a chance to respond, but I know from my reading there's significant research showing what does and does not work when teaching kids to read. Could you respond to Mr. Bowman's argument that balanced literacy is an effective approach to reading instruction?
Right, well, reading influences every aspect of life, and we know that students are learning to read up until 3rd grade, and then from there they are reading to learn. And unfortunately, for too long, there's been this balanced literacy approach that has taught the children to read the wrong way, and the cueing that we were briefly discussing is an important component of that, which essentially tells children to memorize some words, guess based on pictures and clues and context, and then skip words that they're not familiar with. So this guessing learning of reading is a huge reason that we have such abysmal literacy rates. And fortunately, there's an effort to address this. But what we heard as well today is that the children with dyslexia and other learning disabilities are the ones who are extremely harmed by this. Children with disabilities suffered in the COVID closures, and they've suffered through these awful literacy programs that have been debunked, and their needs need to be prioritized going forward.
Right. And I'm very pleased that we have Ms. Houchin on the committee, because I know she's going to bring some great wisdom to this issue along with some others. I've got to keep track of my questions here. Mr. Sullivan, I'd like you to, I've lost my question. Goodness gracious here. You have recommended to address the problem of people not using WIOA, companies not using WIOA. You addressed the problem. You recommended improving coordination with the Higher Ed Act. Right. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how we could have a better coordination between the two systems, and that would lead to more workers gaining in-demand skills?
Thank you for the question. Let me begin by just pointing out that we have two primary funds in this nation that fund talent: the Pell Grant and WIOA. I have a question for you. Why would we keep them separate? We're trying to accomplish one workforce in this nation, and yet we're using funds from two different instruments that have lots of different prescriptive rules around them that make it exceptionally difficult to accomplish the goal that we have set out. And so at a minimum, a level of coordination that focuses the United States dollar on solving the issue at hand.
And I'm going to take a little point of personal privilege here to say, I think everybody who's going into any kind of education program is looking to come out with a career. So I've been preaching for a long time that whether you get a baccalaureate degree, whether you get a diploma, whether you get a certificate, you are in career education. And I dislike very much separating one kind of education from another kind of education. So I have talked about that a lot because I was getting an English degree. I wanted a job. If you're going into learning to weld, you want a job. And I think it's really terrible that we are separating people that way. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up and giving me the opportunity to respond to that. I do think it's something we have to really focus on. And I think talking more about short-term Pell and how we can help people gain skills that will lead them to a career, whether it involves a baccalaureate degree, a master's degree, or a doctorate, or whatever that is. But we desperately want people to get skills to be able to improve their lives in the long term. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. I think we've had an excellent hearing. Governor Polis, I appreciate you very, very much for coming back. And you and I've always felt you had great common sense, and you proved it again today. And I appreciate it. And I'm very pleased we've had this as our first hearing, and we have a lot of work to do for the American people. So thank you all for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. And I thank everybody in the audience. The meeting is adjourned.